There is a kind of INTJ life that looks extraordinary from the outside and feels strangely empty on the inside. A life optimized for complexity, mastery and control, built by a mind that is functionally a generation ahead of the people around it. DH is a clean example of that archetype, not as a person to judge, but as a pattern to study. A prodigy in systems and strategy, an architect of artificial minds, someone whose intuition and logic reshape what intelligence is allowed to be. For existential neurobiology, EN, the question is not, how did he get so smart? But, what happens to a human when this is the only safe place they're allowed to live? From an EN lens, the interesting thing is what happens when cognition becomes a primary survival organ very early, and everything else is quietly left behind. That gap is what I am calling cognitive isolation. Cognitive isolation is not just being clever, not just being the smartest person in a meeting. It is living in an internal world so dense, so abstract, and so far in the future that almost nobody can join you there in a way that feels like genuine company. You have conversations, you collaborate, you even lead teams, but almost all of it happens in a vertical direction. You explain down, you simplify, you translate. The experience of being met horizontally, mind to mind, is rare enough to feel almost mythical. If you sit anywhere near this archetype, it often starts very young. You notice that adults miss patterns that are obvious to you. You see moves ahead in games. You see cause and effect in families, in classrooms, in systems. People praise you for being bright, and they also tell you to dial it back, to stop overcomplicating things, to be more normal. Your nervous system learns something precise. My depth is useful when it produces results, and my depth is too much when it shows up as feeling. So you start making a deal. You will keep bringing depth as long as you are allowed to convert it into performance. That deal shapes everything that comes after. Instead of depth going into grief, shame, confusion, or terror, you pour it into optimization, strategy, and control. You become the boy, then the man, whose value lies in what his mind can produce. The more valuable your cognition becomes, the less safe it feels to show any other part of you. From the outside, this looks like excellence. You collect credentials, projects, wins. You get invited into increasingly rare rooms. People talk about your potential. They talk about disruption, genius, vision. You are useful, impressive, perhaps even iconic in very specific domains. From the inside, something else is happening that is much less glamorous. Your body becomes a kind of machinery to move your brain between workstations. You notice it mostly when it fails, when it is exhausted, wired, aching, or numb. You manage it like you manage everything else, with routines, protocols, and hacks. Listening to it does not really occur as an option. It is supposed to keep up. Your emotions get categorized as noise. Anxiety is something to regulate so you can think. Anger is something to channel into drive. Sadness is an inefficiency or a private indulgence. Vulnerability is a security hole in the system. In EN terms, the organism has made a hard bet. The safest place to live is inside abstraction. Relationships organize around function as well. People become collaborators, sources of information, constraints, or very occasional refuges. You may care deeply, but you tend to care through problem-solving more than through presence. If you cannot improve something, you feel useless, and so you withdraw. You are most comfortable where you can bring leverage, not where you are simply allowed to be. Slowly, almost without noticing, You train yourself out of situations where you are just another human in the room. You are either the architect, the strategist, the fixer, or you are not there. At first, this works. In some ways, it works brilliantly. You are given power over systems. You are trusted with decisions that affect other people's lives, money, opportunities. You may even feel for a while that this is what you were built for. You are finally in environments where your pattern vision is an asset rather than an annoyance. But there is always a cost curve. Because you are good at deferring pain into the future, you tend to meet that curve late. When it arrives, it doesn't look like one big crisis. It looks like a background sense that nothing is landing as deeply as it should. The first cost is mutuality. You are used to carrying the cognitive load, so you carry it everywhere. You anticipate, you preempt, you adjust around other people's blind spots. You do not consciously want to be superior, but you quietly stop expecting to be met at your own level. Most of your connections become vertical. You are the one who understands, who sees around corners, who can model 4 or 5 moves ahead. Other people lean on that. They like having your mind in the room. What almost nobody sees is that you rarely get the experience of leaning back into someone else's mind and feeling held there. That fundamental human experience of being got is mostly absent. The second cost is permission to be ordinary. If everyone around you is attached to the architect, the visionary, the problem solver, where do you go when you are tired, when you are lost, when you have no idea? If your worth is fused to being the mastermind, dropping the mastermind stance feels like self-erasure. Admitting confusion or fear lands in your nervous system as danger, not intimacy. So you keep performing competence long after it has stopped feeling like you. The mask hardens. You become the role. Ordinary human needs like rest, support, or not knowing start to feel like design flaws in your personality rather than basic features of being alive. The third cost is contact with your own experience. Because you can think your way around pain, you do. You can zoom out, explain it, model it, contextualize it. You can put it in a 10-year frame, or a civilization frame, or a technological frame, and in that frame it looks smaller, more manageable. But your body does not live in that frame. Your body lives in one nervous system, in a room, in a day. So while your mind is busy running high-level simulations, your body is quietly tightening, bracing, numbing, or collapsing. You call it stress. You call it burnout. You call it needing a better system. You rarely call it, I am not inhabiting my own life. Over time, that becomes the central wound of this archetype, a life that is brilliantly designed and poorly inhabited. This is the crux of the DH archetype for existential neurobiology. It is not that you are too smart, it is that your intelligence has been conscripted into permanent defense duty. When cognition is your survival organ, you are never off the clock. Every problem is yours to solve. Every failure is yours to anticipate. Every relationship is another system to stabilize. Underneath that, there is often a very young, very ordinary human longing that has never been given language. To be with someone who is not impressed by you, not intimidated by you, and not dependent on your usefulness to stay. That longing sits right in the territory your survival system avoids: dependence, need, shared vulnerability. Because that longing is so threatening, you may not recognize it directly. Instead, what you notice on the surface is contempt. Contempt for people who seem lazy or irrational. Contempt for colleagues who want reassurance instead of efficiency. Contempt for partners who demand emotional presence when you are trying to hold a complex mental model together. In EN language, Contempt is often frozen grief. It is what happens when the part of you that wanted to be met gives up and rebrands itself as someone who does not need anyone. That posture protects you from disappointment, but it also locks you into isolation. The more you live from contempt, the harder it becomes to admit that you are actually lonely. So what do you do with this, if you recognize pieces of yourself here? The reflex solution inside this archetype is always the same. Learn more, optimize more, design a better life. But you cannot outthink a survival strategy that was built by thinking in the first place. You are trying to debug the operating system using the same process that wrote it. In existential neurobiology, the move is not to abandon your mind or to become less INTJ. The move is to turn the same quality of attention you bring to external systems onto the internal system that has been running you. To notice where your nervous system decided that mind was safer than body, that understanding was safer than being understood, that control was safer than contact. You will not think your way into a different way of being, but you can use your mind to map the architecture of your own avoidance. When you can see the structure clearly, you can start making smaller, less glamorous moves, letting your body's signals register for 2 more seconds before you override them. Staying in a conversation for 1 more layer after you would normally retreat into problem solving. Noticing when contempt flares and asking what grief or fear might be sitting under it. None of that looks impressive from the outside, but for this archetype, those are radical moves. They are you experimenting with being a human who has a powerful mind, rather than a powerful mind dragging a neglected human around behind it. If DH is one visible edge of this INTJ archetype, you may be the quieter, less public version. Your life may not be global, but the pattern can be almost identical. High cognition, underdeveloped human experience. You do not have to destroy what makes you rare to reclaim what makes you human. You do have to stop pretending that your brain can live your life for you. That is the invitation of this disassembly, not to fix yourself, not to downgrade your intelligence, but to see the architecture you are living in clearly enough that you can choose, slowly and deliberately, where to loosen it. See for a better way of being. Just stop here. Dive into existential neurobiology, a map for being real, existential and visceral, that transcends mere psychology, a place to see for better being. Click the link on the screen to dive deeper. See you inside.